The silent observer Maya Chen sat in the back corner of Combat Hall Alpha, her dark eyes fixed on the training mat, where a 7-foot Gorvani was demonstrating bone-crushing techniques to a circle of impressed cadets. She said nothing as usual. The other species at the Intergalactic Military Academy had long since dismissed her as the quiet human who somehow qualified for advanced combat training, despite having no visible advantages. The Academy's harsh reality: the Academy drew the strongest, fastest, and most dangerous beings from across the galaxy. Towering Gorvani with their stone-like skin and devastating strength, swift Zephyrians with their multiple arms and lightning reflexes, armored Keth with their natural weapons and regenerative abilities, and then there was Maya, barely 5.5 feet tall with no claws, no armor, no enhanced senses that anyone could detect. Instructor Vextai, a battle-scarred Thrakari veteran, prowled between the groups of cadets. His 6 eyes swept the room, assessing each species' natural advantages. When his gaze fell on Maya, his mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement or disdain. "Today we focus on species-specific combat applications," Vextai announced, his translator making his chittering speech understandable to all. "Each of you will demonstrate your primary evolutionary advantage in combat scenarios." Displays of power one by one, the cadets showcased their abilities. Thorak, a massive Gorvani, shattered a reinforced combat dummy with a single punch. His rocky fists could punch through starship hulls, a trait that had made his people legendary as shock troops. Next came Zara, a Zephyrian whose 4 arms moved in a blur as she struck 12 separate targets simultaneously. Her species had evolved from arboreal hunters, developing multiple limbs and enhanced coordination that made them perfect for multi-front combat scenarios. The demonstration continued with Krix, a Keth warrior whose armored carapace deflected projectile weapons while razor-sharp spines extended from his forearms. His people were living weapons, bred for war across countless generations of conflict. Each display drew appreciative murmurs from the watching cadets. These were the elite, the chosen few from species that had earned their place in the galaxy, through strength, speed, or natural weaponry. "The humans turn human," Vextai called, his 6 eyes focusing on Maya. "Your turn." Maya stood slowly, moving to the center of the training mat with unhurried steps. The other cadets fell silent, some leaning forward with curiosity, others barely containing their amusement. What could the soft, pink creature possibly demonstrate? She stood in the center of the mat, arms at her sides, breathing steady and controlled. The silence stretched for long seconds. "Well?" Vextai demanded. "Demonstrate your species' combat advantage." Maya's voice, when she finally spoke, was quiet but carried clearly through the hall. "This is my demonstration." Laughter erupted from several groups. Thorak's rumbling chuckles shook the floor. "Standing still is not a combat technique, human. Perhaps she's demonstrating human surrender protocols," Zara suggested, her forearms gesturing dismissively. Even Instructor Vextai seemed puzzled. "Cadet Chen, this is a combat demonstration, not meditation class." Maya remained perfectly still, her dark eyes calm and focused. "I understand the assignment, Instructor. The challenge." The mockery continued until Grim, a particularly aggressive Zephyrian from the advanced combat track, stepped forward. His species' natural arrogance combined with his considerable skill had made him one of the Academy's most feared cadets. "Let me demonstrate proper combat technique to the human," Grim announced, his 4 arms flexing as he moved onto the mat. "Perhaps she'll learn something useful before she washes out." Instructor Vextai considered the request. Combat demonstrations often included sparring, and Grim was skilled enough to control his strikes. "Very well, standard sparring rules. First to yield or achieve incapacitation wins." The other cadets formed a circle around the mat, eager to see the inevitable conclusion. Grim was fast, strong, and experienced. Maya was human. The impossible moment. Grim circled Maya like a predator, his 4 arms weaving in a hypnotic pattern, designed to confuse opponents about which would strike first. Maya turned slowly to track his movement but otherwise remained motionless. "Your species fascinates me," Grim taunted as he moved. No natural weapons, no armor, no speed. How did humans ever survive their homeworld? Maya's response was barely audible. Very carefully, Grim attacked without warning, all four arms striking simultaneously from different angles. It was a technique that had overwhelmed countless opponents, creating too many threats to defend against effectively. Maya wasn't there. One moment she stood in the center of Grim's attack pattern. The next, Grim was face down on the training mat, three of his four arms pinned behind him at angles that made several observers wince. Maya knelt beside him, applying precise pressure to nerve clusters that made the powerful Zephyrian's entire body go limp. Yield, Maya said quietly. The hall fell silent except for Grim's labored breathing. No one had seen her move. The attack and counter had happened too fast for most alien nervous systems to process. How? Thorak rumbled, his stone features creased. In confusion, Maya released Grim and stood, offering her hand to help him up. The gesture seemed almost mockingly polite after what had just occurred. Questions, without answers. Instructor Vextai approached the mat, his 6 eyes studying Maya with new intensity. Explain your technique, Cadet Chen. Redirected kinetic energy, Maya replied simply. He provided all the force necessary for his own defeat. Impossible, Crix clicked, his armor plates shifting nervously. No species has reflexes that fast, Maya looked at him with those calm, dark eyes. Who said anything about reflexes? The questions came in a rush then. How had she moved so quickly? How had she known exactly where to strike? How had she applied techniques that worked on Zephyrian anatomy when humans and Zephyrians had no common evolutionary history? Maya answered, none of them directly. Instead, she returned to her corner of the hall and sat down, once again becoming the quiet observer who said nothing and seemed to do even less. Growing suspicion as the class continued, however, several cadets noticed something they had missed before. Maya's eyes never stopped moving. She watched every demonstration, every technique, every display of alien anatomy and combat ability with the focused attention of someone cataloging information. When Thorak demonstrated how his people's stone-like skin could deflect energy weapons, Maya noted exactly where the skin was thinnest. When Zara showed off Zephyrian speed and coordination, Maya observed the slight delay in nerve impulses that preceded each movement. When Crix displayed his natural armor and weapons, Maya identified the joint vulnerabilities that all arthropod species shared. She was learning. Constantly, quietly, systematically learning everything about every species in the room. The instructor's realization Instructor Vextai had survived dozens of wars precisely because he was observant. As the class progressed, he began to understand what he was witnessing. The human wasn't just sitting quietly. She was studying them all like a scientist examining specimens. After dismissing the class, he approached Maya as she gathered her minimal equipment. Cadet Chen, he said carefully, what classification is your homeworld listed as in Academy records? Maya looked up at him with those unsettling dark eyes. Class 8 Moderate Gravity World, Instructor. And what classification would you assign? For the first time since he'd known her, Maya smiled. It was a small expression. Barely visible, but it sent an unexpected chill down Vextai's exoskeleton. That would depend on your definition of moderate, Instructor. She walked away, leaving Vextai staring after her with growing concern. Something about the quiet human didn't add up. And in his experience, when something didn't add up in combat training, people died. Seeds of doubt, that evening, whispered conversations filled the dormitory halls. Cadets who had dismissed Maya as weak began to reconsider. Grim, nursing bruises from nerve strikes that had bypassed his natural defenses entirely, was unusually quiet about his defeat. She knew exactly where to strike, he confided to his roommate, like she'd studied Zephyrian anatomy for years. Similar conversations echoed through other species' quarters. How had the human identified vulnerability points that were supposed to be closely guarded species secrets? How had she moved with such precision while appearing to barely move at all? Maya, for her part, sat in her small single quarters and reviewed the day's observations. Each species had revealed crucial information about their combat capabilities, their anatomical weaknesses, their behavioral patterns, information that could prove invaluable in future encounters. She opened a secure communication channel to Earth, typing a brief report. Integration proceeding as planned. Local species continue to underestimate human capabilities. Recommend maintaining current classification levels until Phase 2 authorization. The Academy's best. Unknown to Maya, her performance had attracted attention from the highest levels of Academy command. In a secure conference room, holographic images of her combat demonstration played on repeat, while senior instructors debated what they had witnessed. The human moved like she knew exactly what Grimm would do before he did it, observed Combat Master Krextar, the Academy's most senior Thrakari instructor. Precognition? Suggested another instructor. Analysis, corrected Instructor Vextai. She's been watching us all, learning our patterns, our weaknesses. Every species that demonstrates gives her more information to work with. The implications were troubling. If one human could systematically analyze and counter the combat capabilities of multiple alien species, what did that suggest about humanity's true potential? We need to test her properly, Combat Master Krextar decided. Against our best. The other instructors exchanged glances. The Academy's best was Krex himself, an undefeated champion who had never lost a combat engagement in over 20 years of warfare and instruction. Preparation for greater trials. Maya finished her report and closed the communication channel. Through her small window, she could see the Academy's training grounds where tomorrow's classes would continue the careful dance of species integration and evaluation. She had been chosen for this mission precisely because humans understood something that other species had forgotten in their rush to develop natural weapons and enhanced abilities. The greatest advantage in any conflict wasn't strength or speed or armor. It was information. And now, surrounded by the galaxy's most dangerous species, Maya was gathering information that would reshape the balance of power among the stars. The quiet human girl who said nothing was learning everything. And soon the galaxy would discover what humans could do when they truly understood their opponents. But first, she would need to face the Academy's greatest champion. And that, Maya, reflected as she prepared for sleep, would be when things became truly interesting. The Academy's corridors grew quiet as another day of training ended, but in the shadows of political maneuvering and species rivalry, plans were already forming that would test the limits of human capability and change the course of galactic history forever. The Academy's best champion. The next morning brought an unusual energy to the Academy corridors. Word of Maya's demonstration had spread beyond Combat Hall Alpha, and cadets from advanced training divisions were whispering about the human who had defeated Grimm without appearing to move. Maya noticed the stares and hushed conversations, but maintained her usual calm demeanor as she made her way to the morning briefing. Official Interest Academy Command had worked through the night, analyzing combat footage and reviewing Earth's classification records. What they discovered in the restricted files made several senior officers reconsider everything they thought they knew about humanity's place in the galactic community. Combat Master Krextar stood before a holographic display showing Earth's true environmental data. The planet's gravity was listed as 1.7 times galactic standard, not the 1.2 previously recorded. Atmospheric composition included trace toxins that would be lethal to most species. Weather patterns showed temperature variations that spanned ranges wider than some planets' entire habitable zones. Reclassification request approved, announced Admiral Vorthak, the Academy's commanding officer. Her crystalline form sparkled with agitation. Earth is now classified as Extreme Deathworld Class 15. How did our initial surveys miss this? Instructor. Vexti shifted uncomfortably. The human delegation provided modified environmental data during first contact negotiations. They claimed it was to avoid unnecessary concern about their planet's conditions. Deception, Admiral Vorthak stated. Flatly. Diplomacy, corrected Combat Master Krextar thoughtfully. If other species had known the true nature of their home world, humans might have been classified as a threat rather than accepted as Federation members. The champion's curiosity, Krextar himself was intrigued by the human's performance. As a Thrakari, he possessed natural advantages that had made him legendary. Enhanced strength, speed, and reflexes combined with an exoskeleton that could deflect most weapons. In 23 years of combat, he had never been defeated. Yet something about Maya's technique troubled him. The way she had countered Grimm suggested not just quick reflexes, but perfect understanding of Zephyrian biology and combat patterns. Such knowledge typically took years of study to acquire. He made his way to the Academy's restricted archives, accessing files on human military history that few beings had clearance to view. What he found changed his understanding of Maya's species entirely. Humans had spent millennia at war with themselves, developing thousands of distinct combat systems across different regions of their death world. They had studied anatomy, physics, psychology, and strategy with an obsession born of necessity. On a planet where everything was trying to kill them, they had learned to kill everything else first. Maya's true training, while Academy officials debated classifications and reviewed files, Maya continued her daily routine with practiced discipline. She woke before dawn, as she had every day since childhood, and began her morning exercises in the small space of her quarters. To any observer, her movements would have seemed unremarkable, slow, controlled stretches and breathing exercises that resembled meditation more than combat training. But Maya was doing something far more complex than simple calisthenics. She was practicing stillness. On Earth, this discipline was called void form, a technique developed by human warriors who had learned that the deadliest predators were often the ones you never saw coming. It involved achieving a state of perfect balance between mind and body, where movement became pure efficiency and awareness expanded beyond normal human limits. Maya had spent 15 years mastering void form, under the guidance of Earth's most secretive military instructors. She could remain motionless for hours while tracking multiple targets, analyzing their movement patterns and calculating optimal response scenarios. To other species, it looked like she was doing nothing. In reality, she was doing everything. HFY formal challenge. Maya's meditation was interrupted by a knock at her door. She opened it to find Instructor Vextai accompanied by Combat Master Krextar himself. The sight of the Academy's legendary champion in her doorway would have intimidated most cadets. Maya simply waited for them to speak. "Cadet Chen," Krextar began, his voice carrying the authority of countless victories. "Your performance yesterday has raised questions about your training background." "Yes, sir," Maya replied neutrally. "I am issuing a formal challenge for tomorrow's advanced combat demonstration. You will face me in single combat before the full Academy assembly." Maya studied Krextar's imposing form. The Thrakari stood nearly 8 feet tall, his chitinous exoskeleton bearing the scars of decades of warfare. His forearms ended in natural weapons that could shred metal, and his speed was legendary throughout the galaxy. "I accept," Maya said simply. Krextar had expected protests, questions about the terms of engagement, or at least some visible sign of nervousness. The human's calm acceptance was somehow more unsettling than fear would have been. "You understand that this is not a training exercise," he clarified. "This is a full-contact combat assessment with Academy Command observing. Injury is possible." Maya's dark eyes met his with steady intensity. "I understand, Combat Master." Preparation and observation, news of the challenge spread through the Academy like wildfire. Betting pools opened among the cadets, with odds heavily favoring Krextar. Most species considered the match a foregone conclusion, the legendary champion against an untested human from a species with no apparent combat advantages. Maya spent the day before the challenge as she always did, observing. She attended all scheduled classes, watched combat demonstrations, and studied the various species around her. To casual observers, she seemed to be preparing for the match by doing absolutely nothing. In reality, she was analyzing everything. During advanced combat theory, she noted how different species favored specific attack patterns based on their anatomy, Thrakari tended to lead with their dominant right arms before following with coordinated strikes from their secondary limbs. Their exoskeletons were strongest at the joints where overlapping plates provided double protection, but this same feature created slight delays in movement transitions. In tactical assessment class, she observed how various species reacted to psychological pressure. Thrakari, despite their fearsome appearance, were methodical fighters who relied on overwhelming physical advantages rather than deception or misdirection. They expected their opponents to either flee or engage in direct confrontation. Maya had no intention of doing either. The night before, as evening approached, Maya received an unexpected visitor. Grim, the Zephyrian she had defeated, stood in her doorway looking uncomfortable but determined. "I wanted to wish you luck tomorrow," he said, his forearms fidgeting nervously, "and to apologize for underestimating you." Maya gestured for him to enter. "No apology necessary. You fought according to your training and instincts." "That's just it," Grim said, settling into the room's single chair. "I've been thinking about our match. You didn't just counter my attacks, you predicted them. How did you know what I was going to do before I did it?" Maya considered her answer carefully. "Your species broadcasts intentions through micro-movements and behavioral patterns. Once you understand the language, it becomes readable." "But how could you possibly understand Zephyrian body language? Our species have no evolutionary connection." "All species follow certain universal principles," Maya explained. "Physics, anatomy, neural response patterns. The details vary, but the fundamentals remain consistent." Grim leaned forward, intrigued despite himself. "You're saying you can read any species?" Maya's small smile returned. "I'm saying that everything communicates, whether it intends to or not." Academy anticipation. Throughout the academy, discussions about tomorrow's match dominated every conversation. Senior instructors debated whether the challenge was fair, given Krextar's obvious advantages. Junior cadets speculated about Maya's true capabilities, with theories ranging from hidden human technology to psychic abilities. In the restricted Command Center, Admiral Vorthak reviewed intelligence reports about human military capabilities that painted a disturbing picture. Earth's history was filled with conflicts of staggering brutality, where humans had systematically studied the art of killing with scientific precision. They had developed weapons, tactics, and strategies specifically designed to overcome superior physical opponents. "Perhaps we should postpone the match," suggested one senior instructor. "If the human possesses capabilities we haven't documented." "No," Combat Master Krextar interrupted, having arrived for the final briefing. "If humans are as dangerous as these reports suggest, we need to understand the extent of their abilities. Better to learn in a controlled environment than discover them during actual conflict." Maya's final preparation. While the academy buzzed with speculation and preparation, Maya sat quietly in her quarters, eyes closed, breathing controlled. She wasn't reviewing combat techniques or visualizing victory scenarios. Instead, she was achieving the perfect stillness that would allow her to respond to whatever Krextar might attempt. In her mind, she replayed every observation she had made of Thrakari combat patterns. She had watched hours of historical footage, analyzed academy training records, and studied the specific ways Krextar moved during demonstrations. She understood his reach, his speed, his preferred techniques, and most importantly, his expectations about how opponents should behave. Tomorrow she would use all of that knowledge against him. She opened her communication channel to Earth one final time before the match, sending a brief message. Phase 2 commencing tomorrow. Recommend increased security protocols for human settlements. Our cover may not survive what's coming. The gathering storm as the academy settled into an uneasy night's rest, Maya remained awake, not from nervousness, but from careful preparation. She reviewed every detail of tomorrow's engagement, considering variables and contingencies with the methodical precision that had made humans the apex predators of their death world. Krextar, in his own quarters, performed traditional Thrakari combat rituals, preparing his mind and body for battle. He expected a challenging fight. The human had clearly demonstrated some skill, but he remained confident in his superior physical capabilities. Neither fighter fully understood what the next day would bring, but both sensed that tomorrow's match would be about more than personal victory. It would establish humanity's place in the galactic hierarchy and determine whether humans would be seen as valuable allies or dangerous threats. In a few hours, the Academy would discover what happened when an unstoppable force met an immovable object, or more precisely, when the galaxy's greatest champion faced an opponent who had learned to turn strength into weakness and motion into defeat. The quiet human girl was about to show the galaxy what her species was truly capable of, and the consequences would reshape the balance of power among the stars. The galactic reckoning dawn broke over the Academy with an electric tension that seemed to charge the very air. Maya woke naturally, as she always did, just before sunrise. Her internal chronometer, honed by years of Earth's unpredictable day-night cycles, required no artificial assistance. She moved through her morning routine with the same deliberate precision she applied to everything: controlled breathing, precise stretches, and the mental exercises that would center her mind for what was to come. The arena transforms the Academy's main combat arena had been transformed overnight. What was normally a simple training space now resembled a gladiatorial amphitheater, with tiered seating that could accommodate the entire Academy population, plus visiting dignitaries. Holographic recording equipment positioned at strategic angles would broadcast the match across the galaxy, ensuring that representatives from every major species could witness what many assumed would be humanity's humbling. Admiral Vorthak stood in the command observation deck, her crystalline form refracting the arena's lighting into prismatic patterns. Around her, senior officers from a dozen species murmured in multiple languages, their translators creating a cacophony of speculation and anticipation. Final odds stand at 47-1 in favor of Combat Master Krextar, reported Lieutenant Zixtal, a nervous Altarian whose natural anxiety made him perfect for statistical analysis. Only 3 beings in the entire Academy have placed wagers on the human. Admiral Vorthak's faceted eyes shifted toward the arena floor where technicians were making final adjustments to the combat platform. And those 3 beings? Instructor Vextai, Cadet Grimm, and Lieutenant Zixtal paused, checking his datapad with obvious confusion. Combat Master Krextar himself, sir. The champion's insight in his preparation chamber. Krextar performed the final movements of the ancient Thrakari war dance, his 4 arms weaving through patterns that had been perfected over millennia of conflict. But his mind was not on tradition. It was analyzing everything he had learned about Maya Chen in the past 24 hours. The restricted files on human military history had revealed disturbing patterns. Humans had a documented tendency to study their enemies with obsessive thoroughness, often spending more time analyzing opponents than training for direct confrontation. They preferred asymmetric warfare, using knowledge and precision to overcome superior strength. Most troubling of all was a recurring theme in human military: philosophy. The concept that any advantage could be turned into a weakness if properly understood and exploited. Krextar's own strengths, his speed, his armor, his natural weapons, might become liabilities against an opponent who truly understood how to use them against him. Still, he was confident. 23 years of victories against the galaxy's most dangerous opponents had taught him that knowledge without physical capability was merely academic theory. The human might understand his techniques, but she would still need to execute counters with perfect timing while under the pressure of his assault. Maya's arrival. Maya entered the arena through the challenger's entrance, and the murmur of conversation died instantly. She wore the standard Academy combat uniform, unadorned and unremarkable, but her presence somehow commanded attention. She moved across the arena floor with steps that seemed almost weightless, each footfall placed with mathematical precision. Cadets who had dismissed her as weak now studied her with new eyes. There was something different about the way she carried herself. Not the swagger of confidence, but the calm certainty of someone who knew exactly what was about to happen. She looked so small, whispered Thorak to his Gorvani companions. His stone-like features showed the first signs of doubt he had experienced since arriving at the Academy. Size is irrelevant, Zara replied, her forearms unconsciously mimicking defensive positions. I've been studying the recording of our match. She moves like she can see the future. The champion's entrance, Krextar's arrival, was announced by the traditional Thrakari war horn, a sound that resonated through the arena like distant thunder. He emerged from the champion's entrance, moving with the fluid grace that had made him legendary, his scarred exoskeleton gleaming under the arena lights. The crowd erupted in appreciation. Here was a warrior they understood, powerful, imposing, victorious. His reputation preceded him like a wave, and even species that had never fought alongside Thrakari knew his name. Maya watched his entrance with the same calm attention she gave everything else. She noted the slight favor he showed his left side, evidence of an old injury that had healed imperfectly. She observed the way his secondary arms moved in perfect synchronization with his primary limbs, indicating a neural pathway that could be disrupted if the right pressure points were accessed. She cataloged the tiny asymmetries in his exoskeleton that revealed stress fractures from decades of combat. To the watching crowd, she appeared to be doing nothing but standing quietly. In reality, she was conducting a detailed tactical analysis that would have impressed Earth's most sophisticated military computers. The rules of engagement, Admiral Vorthak's voice echoed through the arena as she announced the formal parameters. This is a combat assessment between Combat Master Krextar of the Thrakari Dominion and Cadet Maya Chen of Earth. Victory conditions are submission, incapacitation or withdrawal from the combat zone. Lethal force is authorized but not encouraged. All Academy combat protocols apply. She paused, her crystalline form catching the light. This assessment is being broadcast to Galactic Federation Command and will serve as an official evaluation of human combat capabilities for classification purposes. Maya felt the weight of those words. This wasn't just a match. It was humanity's trial by fire, with the entire galaxy watching to determine whether her species would be accepted as equals or classified as threats to be managed. The moment of truth. The two fighters moved to opposite sides of the circular combat platform. Krextar assumed the traditional Thrakari combat stance, his forearms spread in a pattern that could defend against attacks from any direction while preparing devastating counters. His movements were textbook perfect, honed by decades of victory. Maya simply stood there. Fighters ready, announced the automated system. Combat assessment begins in 10 seconds. The countdown echoed through the arena. 10, 9, 8. Maya closed her eyes. 7, 6, 5. Krextar's muscles tensed, preparing for explosive movement. 4, 3, 2. Maya's breathing slowed to barely perceptible levels. 1. Commence. The dance of destruction. Krextar moved with blinding speed, crossing the platform in a blur of coordinated strikes designed to overwhelm any opponent. His attack pattern was flawless, a testament to Thrakari combat evolution and his own mastery. Maya was no longer where his strikes were aimed. She had moved at the last possible instant, not away from his attack but into it, positioning herself in the tiny space between his coordinated limbs where his own momentum created a brief vulnerability. Her movement was so minimal that most observers missed it entirely. What they couldn't miss was the result. Krextar's own force, redirected through contact points Maya had calculated with geometric precision, sent him stumbling past his intended target. Before he could recover, Maya was behind him, her hands positioned at specific nerve clusters in his exoskeleton. First lesson, Maya said quietly, her voice somehow carrying to every corner of the silent arena. Overwhelming force becomes overwhelming. Weakness when properly redirected. She applied pressure to neural pathways that most beings didn't even know existed in Thrakari anatomy. Krextar's left secondary arm went completely numb, disrupting his perfect coordination. The champion adapts, to his credit. Krextar adapted quickly. He spun away from Maya's hold, using his superior reach to create distance while reassessing his opponent. The numbness in his arm was temporary but troubling. How had the human identified nerve clusters that even Thrakari medical specialists struggled to locate? Interesting, he acknowledged, circling Maya with new respect. But you cannot rely on surprise twice. Maya remained motionless in the center of the platform, tracking his movement with eyes that seemed to see everything at once. I'm not relying on surprise at all. Krextar attacked again, this time varying his patterns and using his reach advantage to stay outside Maya's apparent range. His strikes came from unexpected angles, mixing feints with real attacks and combinations that had defeated champions from a dozen species. None of them connected. Maya moved like liquid, flowing around his attacks with movements so economical they seemed impossible. She never blocked or deflected. Instead, she simply wasn't where his strikes were aimed. And each time he committed to an attack, she was somehow in position to exploit the momentary vulnerability it created. The revelation, the watching crowd had fallen completely silent, unable to comprehend what they were witnessing. This wasn't combat as they understood it. It was something else entirely, a demonstration of principles that seemed to violate everything they knew about physical confrontation. She's not fighting him, Instructor Vexitai murmured to Admiral Vorthak. She's conducting a physics experiment. On the platform, Maya continued her impossible dance around Krextar's increasingly desperate attacks. Each exchange left the champion slightly more off balance, slightly more frustrated, slightly more vulnerable to the patterns Maya was establishing. Second lesson, Maya announced during a brief lull as Krextar repositioned himself. Every action creates an opportunity for someone who understands the underlying systems. She gestured subtly toward his stance. Your species evolved for direct confrontation against similarly armored opponents. Your combat techniques assume your enemy will meet force with force, speed with speed, aggression with aggression. Krextar's 4 eyes narrowed. And humans? Maya's small smile appeared. Humans evolved on a world where everything was bigger, stronger, faster, and more heavily armed than we were. We learned different lessons. The final exchange, Krextar made his final assault with everything he had remaining, abandoning technique for pure aggression in an attempt to overwhelm Maya through sheer force. It was a move born of desperation, but executed with the skill of a master warrior. Maya met his charge head-on for the first time in the match. What happened next defied every law of physics the observers thought they understood. Maya didn't dodge or redirect Krextar's attack. Instead, she absorbed its full force while simultaneously striking specific points on his exoskeleton with surgical precision. The impact should have crushed her. Instead, Krextar collapsed. Maya stood over the fallen champion, breathing normally while he struggled to understand what had happened. She had somehow used his own attack energy against his nervous system, creating a feedback loop that overwhelmed his motor functions. Third lesson, Maya said, her voice carrying to every corner of the stunned arena. The strongest force is always the one you generate yourself. The aftermath Krextar yielded with the grace of a true warrior, acknowledging defeat while struggling to comprehend how it had been achieved. As Maya helped him to his feet, another gesture of respect that somehow seemed more significant after what had just occurred, the arena remained in absolute silence. Finally, Admiral Vorthak found
her voice.
Combat assessment concluded. Victory to Cadet Maya Chen of Earth. The words seemed to break whatever spell had held the crowd, and suddenly the arena erupted in chaotic noise. Cadets from every species shouted questions, theories, and expressions of disbelief in a dozen languages. Maya ignored the chaos, focusing instead on Krextar. Are you injured, Combat Master? He flexed his arms experimentally, feeling sensation return to the limb she had temporarily disabled. Bruised pride, primarily. How did you learn to identify Thrakari neural pathways? I didn't, Maya replied. Simply, I learned to identify universal principles that apply to all neural pathways. Your specific anatomy just determined how those principles manifested. The Galactic response within hours, recordings of the match were being analyzed by military specialists across the galaxy. The implications were staggering. If one human could systematically defeat the Academy's greatest champion using techniques that seemed to violate conventional understanding of combat, What did that suggest about humanity's military potential? Emergency sessions convened in capital cities throughout the Federation. Some species called for immediate restrictions on human military training. Others demanded full integration of human techniques into their own combat doctrines. A few suggested that humanity be offered leadership roles in Federation defense planning. Maya, meanwhile, returned to her quarters and sent a final message to Earth. Phase 2 complete. Recommend immediate implementation of Phase 3 protocols. The galaxy now knows what we're capable of. The question is what we do with that knowledge. The new paradigm. In the days that followed, everything changed at the Academy. Maya found herself elevated from curiosity to phenomenon, with representatives from dozens of species requesting demonstrations of human combat techniques. She agreed to limited instruction, always careful to reveal principles without exposing the full extent of human capabilities. Combat Master Krekstar became her most dedicated student, recognizing that his defeat had taught him more about combat than his previous victories combined. "You fight like you can see the connections between all things," he observed during one training session. "Not see," Maya corrected. "Understand. Everything in the universe operates according to discoverable patterns. Once you understand the patterns, you can predict the outcomes." The true lesson as weeks passed and Maya's reputation spread throughout the galaxy. The true significance of her victory became clear. She hadn't just defeated the Academy's champion, she had demonstrated that intelligence, observation, and understanding could overcome any physical advantage. More importantly, she had shown that humans didn't succeed despite being weaker than other species. They succeeded because they had learned to turn weakness into strength, to find advantage in disadvantage, and to use their opponent's power against them. The quiet human girl who had sat silently in the back of combat class had become the galaxy's newest legend. But she had also become something more dangerous, proof that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their determination. It was their ability to understand their enemies better than those enemies understood themselves. And in a galaxy full of potential conflicts and competing interests, that ability would prove more valuable than any natural armor, enhanced speed, or devastating strength. The universe had learned what humans were capable of when they truly understood their opponents. The question now was whether the galaxy was ready for the consequences of that knowledge. Maya Chen had shown them what one human could do with perfect understanding and flawless execution. Somewhere in the depths of space, other humans were watching the recordings and taking notes, preparing for whatever challenges the galaxy might bring. The age of human warfare was about to begin, and it would be unlike anything the galaxy had ever experienced before. The end.